The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today is Friday, January 20th, 2023. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to follow up on several stories that we've been covering this week. Firstly, we'll go to Atlanta, Georgia, where the identity of the forest defender, the protester who was standing against the $90 million cop city, was killed. More details on that story. And of course, down in the state of Florida, we have Ronald DeSantis, who is going full hoods off. There's no question about the deeply rooted racism and white supremacy that is at the core, that is at the rot of the heart of Ronald DeSantis, especially when you consider his background as a teacher teaching pro-slavery and pro-Confederate lessons, according to the New York Times. I'll read a little bit of that article, but more details on his latest white supremacist move of banning the teaching of Black history. That's right. The banning of AP African American history in the state of Florida. We mentioned it and went over it a bit yesterday, but I want to give more details on it as well as some of the responses. And finally, one additional story that we'll be talking about, of course, is this contract dispute that is going on between Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro at the Daily Wire, or rather, it's not a dispute. They couldn't come to terms, but the reason they couldn't come to terms is at dispute. Why it's relevant to me is the fact that so much money is on the line for sub-mediocre white men in the conservative movement. It is hysterical that someone like Steven Crowder would be offered $50 million over the course of 4 years for his YouTube videos. I mean, there is no bottom to the lack of meritocracy that exists in this country. I mean, there's just no question whatsoever that this is the country where the most mediocre white men can excel to the top. I mean, look at Ron DeSantis, look at Donald Trump. So it's only fitting that someone like Steven Crowder could get offered that in the first place. Let's begin with what happened at Cop City, because I want us to keep a very close eye on this. This is the direct confrontation between the people and the police state that goes beyond the police killing us, particularly killing Black life. This is protesters gathering to protect the forests and, quite frankly, the people, the surrounding cities, the areas that would be impacted by this Disneyland for police officers. They have been protesting for over a year. And in that time, these protests have been completely peaceful. The types of protests that have taken place have been people camping out, building tree houses, making it impossible for contractors to cut down the trees. This has been responded with SWAT teams. DeKalb County SWAT team in particular. They are the ones who have been doing the dirty work, but they have been doing so in conjunction with Homeland Security, with Georgia Bureau of Investigations, the state of Georgia. So they're not alone. This is a multilateral, on every level, state, federal, and local. They have been bringing brute force, weapons, to a peaceful protest in the woods. This is not new, but I want to bring this in context of how the confusion over this particular story is coming about. The protester that was killed has a stated history of being non-violent. Manuel Terran, a forest defender, I'm reading from unicornriot.ninja. The protester killed by police has been identified as Manuel Terran, a forest defender who also went by the nickname of Tort. Terran was from Tallahassee, Florida, and traveled to Atlanta to participate in the effort to protect the forest. Their identity was first reported by the Atlanta Community Press. For the past year, Terran spent their time between Atlanta and Florida, where they participated in Tallahassee Food, Not Bombs, and disaster relief efforts through building housing for low-income communities hit by hurricanes. Now, that was just a brief description of who the protester was, But I want to read this tweet from David Peisner, who is a writer for the New York Times, the Rolling Stones, the New York Mag, et cetera, et cetera. This is what they said on Twitter. Number one, I can't pretend to know what happened Wednesday morning between Manuel Turan and the police, but I did get to know them pretty well while I was reporting for the Bitter South. We spoke at length about a lot of things, including a commitment to nonviolent resistance. In their conversations, it was clear that Tort had thought deeply about these issues in both a moral and strategic way. Sure, they could have been lying to me or they could have changed their mind about it, but neither of those things square easily with the person I got to know. Throughout the reporting on the Defend ATL Forest and the controversial plans to build a training center for the police on forested land in South Atlanta, I've tried to maintain enough distance from the story to write about it in a way that's fair to all those in the debate. Manuel's death makes that distance harder to maintain. I find the official narrative of Wednesday morning's events difficult to swallow, and the speed with which elected officials, including the mayor of Atlanta and the governor of Georgia, endorsed that narrative disturbing, if not surprising. Number 5, the fact that at present law enforcement has produced neither body cam footage nor reported recovering a gun certainly does not inspire great confidence in their version of events. This is what I was talking about yesterday. The prevailing narrative right now that's coming out of the media, like the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which is the biggest paper in Atlanta. It's a nationally renowned paper, but it's based in Atlanta. The mayor of Atlanta, Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, they have all gone with this very insidious narrative that simply gives the appearance, the illusion, the feeling. It leaves it in your head. When you read the official report from the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, or if you read the press releases, or if you read anything from the state, they give you the impression that the victim opened fire and that a police officer was shot. And as a result, the officers returned fire, killing this protester. But no body cam footage has been released. No gun has been recovered. And all we can do is take the word of Georgia Bureau of Investigations. That's all we can do. Now, with any of these cases, we, on our side of the equation, have to take in account the possibility that it played out exactly as the cops said. But so many times we have all experienced that whatever the cops say in their initial press release is not true. And they are never held accountable for it. Meanwhile, what this has the effect of doing, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about the leak that came from the Supreme Court. The investigation is over and they can't figure out who actually leaked the Roe versus Wade decision from the Supreme Court. And you'll see why I'm connecting those two. All we have at this juncture is the word of the Georgia Bureau of Investigations. Now, what they're saying goes contrary to what everyone who knows the protester who was killed, who he was, who they were. It goes completely contrary to it. But what happens? What happens when the police release these statements? They are echoed by the media. They're echoed by the mayors of the cities who are obligated, like they can't possibly question the police. What happens? It has a stifling effect. It always has the impact of making people turn away. As soon as people see any possibility of wrongdoing on behalf of the protester, on behalf of the black person, on behalf of a child, it doesn't matter, on behalf of anyone who was killed by a police officer or anyone who was done wrong by the system, as soon as we get a whiff of some possibility that that person was wrong, everybody stands down. And the cops know this. And it doesn't matter that if months later, when the investigation finally comes out and they find out that this was friendly fire, when they find out that he had no gun, when they thought it was a firework, or when they thought it was a phone, whatever excuse they come up with, it won't matter at that point, because they would have severed the anger and the backlash, rightful anger, righteous indignation, and righteous backlash from the people. We should be tired of police officers killing us in any of these situations. A man in a tent in the forest, minding his business at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you're storming him with a SWAT team? Why? Because they're holding up progress of their new playground. These forest defenders are holding up the progress of these cops' new playground, where they're going to get a sound stage where they can do movies. They're going to get a Black Hawk helicopter landing pad where they can. I mean, this is their dream come true. $90 million facility. How dare these people be in the woods trying to protect the people and the forest from the greed of the cops? But no. There is a strategic plan that I am well aware of that is happening in every city. Every city knows how to make sure that the people do not react when a police officer kills somebody. Number one, make that person seem guilty by any means necessary. Could it be that Manuel shot this officer? It's in the realm of possibilities, sure. But does that measure up to a person who has a principled stance, both a moral and a strategic stance against the use of violence, to then go out in a blaze of glory with the police? No, that's not adding up one bit. That's not adding up one bit. I saw this play from the police officers in Gulfport, Mississippi. I saw this play with police. I mean, every story that I cover all the way back to Michael Brown. All the way back to Michael Brown, police officers and the unions and the cities that are accomplices with them, they 100% know that all they have to do is drop into the public discourse that this person was somehow guilty of something, and so therefore they deserve their death. Could Manuel have shot this police officer? Well, I'll say this: drop the video footage, show us all the body cam footage, and shut our mouths. Which is what police officers immediately do in the aftermath of a shooting if it proves their innocence. This is what they do if it proves their innocence. The best way to stop a response from the people is to prove that the cop was right. Well, maybe it's just a few days. Let's give them a few more days. No, the people are protesting. They're gathering there tomorrow night. Anyone who's in the area and wants to participate, be mindful. Be mindful that the police have been hyping themselves up for some time around this particular issue. According to reports from Unicorn Riot and other outlets, they have been hyping themselves up to use deadly force against the forest defenders. So anyone who's going out there, be mindful that that is the mindset of the police officers who are out there. Take that into consideration. But this is the last thing I'll say about this before we move on. Don't believe police officer press reports. Do not believe reports from any state bureau of investigation. Read through them with all of the suspicion that you would give people who have lied to you continuously. Don't take their word for it. Demand video. A moment ago, I made reference to the Supreme Court decision that was leaked last year, and I referenced it in context of how the system is really proficient and efficient at neutralizing protest and neutralizing the reaction of the people. An investigation has concluded, and the Supreme Court investigating itself, rather the marshal of the Supreme Court investigating this leak, interviewed several employees of the Supreme Court, and they are unable to discover how it was leaked. Now, if you've been listening to the show any amount of time, if you were listening particularly last year, I said it. These people leaked it themselves, particularly Justice Alito, I believe. Justice Alito leaked it himself for the purposes of neutralizing protests before they even began. I want to read for you this release from the Supreme Court in regard to the leak investigation. In May of 2022, this court suffered one of the worst breaches of trust in its history, the leak of a draft opinion. The leak was no mere misguided attempt at protest. It was a grave assault on the judicial process. For these reasons and others, the court immediately and unanimously agreed that the extraordinary betrayal of trust that took place last May warranted a thorough investigation. The Chief Justice assigned the task to the Marshal of the Supreme Court and her staff. After months of diligent analysis of forensic evidence and interviews of almost 100 employees, the Marshall team determined no further investigation was warranted with respect to to many of the 82 employees who had access to electronic or hard copies of the draft opinion. In following up on all available leads, however, the Marshall's team performed additional forensic analysis and conducted multiple follow-up interviews of certain employees, but the team has to date been unable to identify a person responsible by a preponderance of the evidence. And so that's it. That's a wrap. They're done. Remember all the outrage and all the fury that was coming from conservative media outlets, from the justices themselves. They could not believe that someone had possibly leaked this digital copy. I mean, it's really difficult to believe that you cannot trace down an electronic record, and here they are unable to figure out who released it. But what was the impact, right? Because I'm going to say this. Things don't just happen, for lack of a better word, willy-nilly in this country, especially not at the highest levels of government. I have come to accept things based on the outcome. Because while I do know we are encompassed about by some morons and some Neanderthals, let's be clear. These people know exactly how to maneuver and manipulate a population of over 330 million people. And so what was the outcome of the leak? Did the leak spark protests so large that we were able to stop the Roe versus Wade decision? No. The decision has come and gone. Roe versus Wade is a thing of the past. Women across the country do not have the right to choose as protected by this decision of the Supreme Court. They are now at the mercy of their individual states. And so the conservative outcome has won. Until further notice, they have the victory. Were there major protests around this? No. All things considered, I mean, there were a couple of marches here and there, but there was nothing that actually moved the dial of any significance. Why? Because the outrage came before the decision was actually made. The outrage around Roe versus Wade came before the decision was actually made. So by the time the decision was made, it was not only fatigue that had set in, but just disillusionment had set in. And that came as a result of the leak. Had the decision been made and announced the same day that it was made, there would have been mass protests all over this country. It's preemptive conditioning is what it's actually called. It's just preemptive conditioning. Justice Alito and whoever else on that conservative bench realized what they were going to do was potentially one of the most triggering things they could have done in this country. How do you stop it? How do you keep it? How do you keep it from brewing over? How do you tamper down the protest? Well, you leak it beforehand so everyone's outrage can be tweeted, Facebook posted, Instagram, videos were made about it. So by the time the decision was actually made, people were tired, people were disillusioned, and people lost their resolve. What I called this when it happened, and now they're saying they just can't possibly figure out who leaked the document. Well, that's also incompetence, because a digital record is pretty easy to track down in any institution, especially one that has the protection and the technology of the highest court in the world, the Supreme Court of the United States of America. And you mean to tell me they can't track down a digital record of who leaked this decision? No, I don't accept that. And the reason I don't accept that is because it seems like a mighty convenient tool in the toolkit of powerful people who want to stifle protests, just like press releases from police agencies. They know the way you stifle protests is by putting anything you can, using any ambiguous language that you can, any misleading information that you can into the initial releases so people stand down. They will know about the killing, the police shooting, but they'll stand down because in their heart, they're like, I guess that person they kind of earned that shooting. This system is proficient and efficient at preserving itself, and it learned its lesson after the George Floyd protest, never to make that mistake again.
Go
Never.
to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and get twice the content and unfiltered interviews without any of the commercial interruptions. Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Welcome back. I want to go back down to the state of Florida, where the governor, Ronald DeSantis, has banned the teaching of AP African American history across the state. No high school can offer the AP African American history course because it violates the Stop Woke Act. And as I said yesterday, they claim that teaching African American history has no discernible value. Reactions are coming from all across the world, particularly here in the United States. I have seen this take off in a way that normally it takes a while for stories like this to pick up this much attention throughout the ecosystem, not just the media, but just, this story has crossed over into almost every area of life. Sports entertainers are getting in on it. Athletes, rather, and the entertainers are getting in on it. Influencers are starting to talk about it because of the sheer absurdity of it. Not only the absurdity, but the flagrant racism that is coming from Ronald DeSantis. And I want to contextualize who this person really is for you. There is a story about Ron DeSantis that is in the New York Times. You can Google it. It is entitled Pranks, Parties, and Politics, Ron DeSantis' Year as a School Teacher. And in that article, they describe reactions, modern reactions, like the New York Times interviewed former students of DeSantis. And the reactions from those students, they described a teacher who regularly taught pro-Confederate and pro-slavery lessons. In addition to having factual inaccuracies in his lessons, he was so committed to this pro-Confederacy, pro-slavery position that the students at the time created a video mocking the teacher, Ron DeSantis. And in that video, they did a skit where one of the students, using a voice similar to mocking Ron DeSantis, went through a pro-Confederacy lesson while the students were bored sleeping in class. Now, I bring this up for two reasons. One, because a person who has been committed to the Confederacy, the way that Ron DeSantis has been committed to the Confederacy through his entire life, surely does not want the truth about the Confederacy taught. And we are not taught the truth about the Confederacy. We're not taught the truth about Jim Crow. We're not taught the truth about racism at all in this country, especially not in high school. Anyone who's going to be honest with you would tell you the best that you're going to get in high school is Harriet Tubman and Martin Luther King and I Have a Dream. That's it. And so, of course, a person who has made arguments in a classroom setting, pro-Confederate arguments, justifying the use of slavery in the classroom, however many years ago this was, at the beginning of his career, before he became a JAG officer with the Navy, before he became the supervisor of torture at Guantanamo Bay, he spent a year at a private school in Georgia teaching the value of the Confederacy and making excuses and giving pro-slavery arguments because of the necessity of it to run the economy. Some of the same standardized arguments that you would hear from libertarians that you'll still hear today. This man was one of the originators of it, but at the beginning of his career. So, of course, this person does not want the truth told about what this country has done to black people. And Ron DeSantis has the unique, this is his gift. This is what he's really good at. He is good at using culture war issues as a distraction while he accomplishes his real agenda, which is the same agenda as any Republican, which is to give away as much money as possible to their rich friends and their donors. This is literally what he has done. You look up the tax hike on Floridians that were passed off to corporations like Publix. Just read that, Google that and read that story, and you'll see how proficient this man is at using culture war issues as a distraction. But he has the added bonus of actually believing it so deep down that it was in him at the beginning of his career, fresh out of Ivy League school. This is who he is. So he gets a 2-for-1. He gets the ability to use this because I'm certain right now at this moment, he's finding new ways of emptying the coffers of Florida and giving it to the richest people that are donating to his campaign. At the same time, he's making it impossible to study African-American history in the state that he is governor over. And this is the person that the Republican Party is looking forward to replacing Donald Trump. He is by far the most malevolent and Machiavellian of all politicians that I have seen in some time. He actually has blood on his hands. Ask the detainees at Guantanamo Bay, the ones that sat across the table from him as he smiled, as he laughed and got joy out of the fact that they were being tortured. Go to the Real News Network and look up the story of Ron DeSantis's time as the supervisor of torture. The details and the descriptions that come from actual detainees is chilling. It's even more chilling when you realize this man, how much power he currently has. But he is in striking distance of becoming the next president of the United States, because we live in a hermetically sealed bubble of ignorance and misdirection and misinformation where up is down and left is right. He has the ability to use this system that has been uniquely crafted for his particular skill set to drop in misinformation in any category, whether it's COVID-19 or whether it's Black history or if it's the Don't Say Gay bill. He has the ability to drop in blood into the water to get all of his right-wing activists going crazy. He has the support of actual Nazis. Most of the time, Nazis take their time picking their candidate because they usually don't have someone who is extreme enough for them until Donald Trump came around. It was easy to pick him. And now Ronald DeSantis, the Nazis of Florida have already lined up in support of this man. They like his work. They like his technique. They like his approach. They like his effectiveness. And so he's already their pick for the president in 2024. And if by chance he happens to win, you should know that he is going in with the efficiency of a JAG officer, an attorney who knows how to dot his I's and cross his T's enough to be able to run for office after supervising over, my God, torture. But that's why it's so important that this story has broken through into the mainstream. It's important because in this way, Ron DeSantis is giving us a 2-year head start on understanding the depth of his racism, the depth of his white supremacy. It's very clear to everyone who sees this move. While Ron DeSantis felt confident enough to make this move, everyone who sees it understands that this man in particular is not a man that we can allow into the White House, because he has made it clear he has every intention of attacking Black people. He has every intention of attacking the LGBTQIA community, and we have every indication that he enjoys. He gets pleasure out of harming other people, or at least watching other people be harmed because of his decisions and his oversight during his time as the JAG officer who supervised torture of human beings. This is who wants to be president of the United States, and this is who Republicans want to be the president of the United States. If there was any person, any cog in the machine that would accelerate our decline into a full-blown fascist state, especially at this time where America is already teetering on the precipice of falling off into the abyss of Nazism, it would be Ronald DeSantis. Ron Dion DeSantis, who is committed to his racism. He's committed to the Confederacy, and he was so committed to a pro-slavery argument that his students, according to the New York Times, had to mock him at the end of the year because he was so committed to it that they could imitate it by the time the year was over. I'm out of time for the public show, but patrons, stay tuned. There's a lot more to go. I'll be discussing the Steven Crowder fiasco. $50 million for a contract was not enough for him. He shouldn't have got a $2 million offer, as well as the Republicans' proposal to add 30% sales tax to all of your purchases, along with their changes to the food stamps program. The cruelty is the point. Everyone else, you can go to patreon.com/the BPD show to get access to it without any commercial interruptions. And if not, have a great weekend. I'll see everyone on Monday.